So to give everyone context for this particular presentation, Penrod Consulting is a company that I consult with for other clients. So people that want me to get involved in some challenging enterprise architecture projects give me a call, and I'm only too delighted to help them. So the case study I'm going to share with you today is a project I did last year through Australian Aid, where the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade had sponsored a project in Cambodia, which was to define a smart city enterprise architecture for Sihanoukville. So for those of you who perhaps have never heard of Sihanoukville before, it is a tiny seaside town southwest of Phnom Penh. So you can see my little blue arrow pointing to exactly where it is. It has a very unfortunate story. Sadly, there's a huge amount of Chinese investment in building up this literal backwater city in Cambodia. With these multi-story buildings as well as casinos. This is pre-COVID. And the city was getting a reputation for being a very fast city. Lots of gambling, lots of drugs, lots of prostitution. And the city was growing faster than the city planners could actually cope with. Sadly, when COVID hit, a lot of the buildings were left half-built, and so it really looked like a ghost town when I got to it. But it was a pleasure helping them define their architecture for a smart city, because it was an opportunity to help a community redefine, redevelop their city and set themselves up for the future. So I'm only too happy to share with you what we did on the project. So to start with, the things I'm going to cover with you today is just go through our architecture storyboard in terms of what was the work all about. I'm then going to take you very quickly through the motivations of the Sihanoukville government, and then show you what their enterprise architecture framework looked like and how we defined a reference model for them to build their smart city on. I'll show you an example of a policy document that they were using. So after the smart direction statement, I'm going to jump into and show you what the conceptual architecture for the smart city looked like. And then how we use the business capability model to help define the roadmap for the future. And then I'll end off with just showing you an example of the governance model that we left the government with to basically establish their enterprise architecture practice. I'm not going to share with you the project context because I've just spoken to you about it, but I will walk you through the government motivation model. What did that look like? The enterprise architecture framework, which was based on my doctoral thesis, which was to define a government interoperability framework to encourage business interoperability across the Sihanouk government. And then we'll jump into the reference model. So again, this reference model was built based on international standards, which we then use to extend and elaborate smart directions or policy statements for the Sihanouk government to manage their future state technology portfolio. Next, we defined the smart city conceptual architecture. Again, the reference model provided a lot of input into building that conceptual architecture. We then worked with the Sihanoukville government to define their business capability model and showed them how to use it as a decision-making tool in the business, and also applied for them maturity levels and forecasts, if you like, of where would government be if they invested in a particular way. what would be the end state in 12 months, 24 months, and 36 months. We then left them with a roadmap, which was prioritized to help them build that future state, taking those steps in 12, 24, and 36 months. And then we left them with EA governance framework and also talked to them about the risks to delivering the roadmap as well. Okay, so let's start with the government motivations. Again, to just explain to you, the people in Sihanoukville or the staff in Sihanoukville and the senior most leaders probably earn about $300 US a month. That's their entire wage. They don't have money to spend on doing projects that you and I would be familiar with in Australia, in the Australian government, or even in the private sector, where these projects typically cost anywhere between $250,000 to a couple of $1 million, depending on the scope of your project. So to get them to actually spend time with us to focus on defining their vision and mission statements was a challenge. They didn't get it. They didn't see why they needed it. But we managed to get them to think about, what do you want Sihanoukville to look like if you want to deliver the smart city? So this was their vision statement. It was all about the economic success of Sihanoukville and to build it in a way that was safe and sustainable. Being on the seaside, it was really important that they preserved the beaches and the environment around Sihanoukville. They also manage a number of islands that are fairly close to Sihanoukville, so which is why the environment was such a big concern for them. And uplifting the well-being of their citizens and the businesses that operated in Sihanoukville was also important. So therefore, their mission was to deliver a modern, inclusive city. Again, because they have tourists coming from all over the world to come and stay in Sihanoukville. If you want to go and visit Sihanoukville, it's quite an easy flight to Phnom Penh, and then hop in a car and drive all the way down to Sihanoukville. Because they want to attract visitors and also improve the life of its citizens, they wanted Sihanoukville to be a place where people enjoyed living, working, and visiting in as well. So the enterprise architecture was recognized as their way of being able to deliver the smart city. And it was made up of 3 components. Obviously, the government motivations, the strategic intent of Sihanoukville set the direction for building out the smart city architecture. So again, the reference models were built based on our understanding of what the mission and vision statements were. And again, because government didn't have highly qualified people in the organization, a lot of this work we had to do as research and literally hold the hands of the staffs to walk them through what is this model about, why are we using it, and how will you use it to define your smart city future. The third component was defining smart city outcomes, because again, the way we explained it is you can have the best architecture in the world, but if you don't understand why you have it, and what it is that you want to be working towards, it's pretty pointless just having a nice looking model. So again, we sat with the Sihanoukville team to define some of those outcomes that government should set for themselves so that we knew how to shape the smart city strategy to then deliver the smart city outcomes. So this slide, for those of you who are very technical enterprise architects, you will see that these are the different types of models that form part of the government enterprise architecture. to help them shape their smart city strategy. So we used these models, the motivation model, which I've spoken about already, as well as the business model canvas to hypothesize what some of the services might look like in the smart city future state. We then went through a series of workshops with literally people on the streets to try and understand, what services do citizens of Sihanouk want. And we had 2 group interviews where we surveyed ordinary citizens, could be from anywhere. We literally picked them off the streets. They were made up of academics, students, market stall holders, even mums and dads who participated in the workshops. We also had a separate workshop with Sihanoukville business people so that we could capture their voice as well to understand the services and the quality of the services that they wanted from government in a smart city world. We then built the business capability model for this government department. It's very similar to our local governments here in Australia. They offer very similar services, and in some cases offer hybrid services where you would expect health and education to be a state-based service. It's actually a service managed by the Sihanoukville government as well. So in going through the process, we ended up delivering them a roadmap. So I'll show you 2 examples of what that roadmap looked like, and then delivered them the governance model to operate the enterprise architecture once we were done. So as part of our governance, it was important that we agreed a set of principles for the smart city enterprise architecture, and I'm not going to read all of them on this slide. These were the 10 principles that we proposed to the Sihanoukville government. Now, these principles come out of a piece of work that was sponsored by the Open Technology Foundation. It doesn't exist anymore, but they did this work to help state governments here in Australia to interoperate. So if you want to integrate and interoperate and deliver seamless citizen services in Australia, these were the 10 principles that you have to subscribe to in order to be able to sell IT services to the Australian government. These principles were written, I think, about 10 years ago now, actually 15 years ago. So the next piece of work was doing the research to identify what a smart city reference model would look like. So those of you who are TOGAF, are familiar with TOGAF, we talk about the enterprise continuum. And one of the things that we do when we're looking at the enterprise continuum is to do our research to identify what are the relevant reference models that we can use to start classifying the building blocks for our organization. So we tend to do research, external research, to identify and build that smart city reference model. So the way we went about doing it was to actually look at the academic research. What did academia say were the components of a smart city? And what we found is that there were a number of solutions that people looked at when they implement smart city models. And in fact, the Singapore government was a really good reference site for us to look at in terms of a practical implementation of a smart city architecture. So we basically started the conversations with the Sihanouk government around needing to have these layers to define the smart city reference architecture. So again, there are references for each one of these layers that we built up into a reference model for the Sihanoukville government. So it starts right up at level 6 when we're looking at, what is it actually trying to achieve? It's about innovation. And working our way down into the various layers required to deliver a smart city, You go through the application layer, the integration layer, the actual instrumentation layer. How do you interconnect the city through all your various protocols? How do we deliver the green city, remembering that Sihanoukville had this sustainability mission? And then what is it that we want to deliver as part of the smart city, which was your last layer. So building on this reference architecture, we also ran a proof of concept project to see how we could use intelligence to manage parking in a very busy marketplace in Sihanoukville. And that was a really interesting project because we partnered with a parking company that manages a lot of our car parks here in Australia, where we put in a lot of cameras and sensors and gathered data and use this reference architecture to test that what we were building out in the POC was aligned to this reference architecture. So if you like, the reference architecture guided the proof of concept and the implementation of that proof of concept in Sihanoukville. So our recommendation to Sihanoukville government in terms of using the reference architecture, it's not just the layered model, it's about the principles, the reference architecture itself, understanding what the end states are, so that you know how to build up to that end state, and using your strategic roadmap to help you build the capabilities that you need to achieve those end states as well. So again, not one thing sits in isolation, but all of these different things work together to help you achieve the future state of Sihanoukville. So the smart direction statements were then used as a way of defining policy so that we could go out to market and select vendors. We could set standards. For those of you who may be familiar with the work I did years ago with the Queensland government, in order to execute government strategy, we used to use position papers, and those position papers allowed us to define the end state that government wanted to achieve. And what we would do is expect agencies to tell us how were they going and helping us achieve government's end state. So this is a very similar way to realize policy in government. You set directions, and then government then works out how to achieve it. So it's a really good linkage if you're trying to work out, how can I actually achieve a vision? Well, you set a direction statement, and then you work out what change is required to achieve that policy statement or that government direction. It's a really good way of also setting priorities for investment, because if you have an initiative that is not contributing to government's end state, then your business case gets pretty weak when you go to Treasury, for example, to go and seek funding. So this is a really good way of getting that close alignment and tight alignment between strategy and the execution of that strategy. So one of the things we did was to write these smart direction statements. Then there were 5 of them, right? These were seen to be priority areas for the Sihanoukville government. And I'm just going to show you one example, which was in e-payments, just so that you get a sense of what's in it, right? So there's this document summary. It basically captures, what's it we're actually asking you to do, and what's the vision, right? And the purpose, and who does it apply to? And it's got all those, government document management stuff in there. And a very high level view of what's the process actually about when we're talking about electronic payments. So in Sihanoukville, when we were there last year, nobody in government accepted electronic payments. It was all pay by, you come to a counter and you pay your fees. They had none of the luxuries that we have here in Australia. So this is the conceptual model that we developed to show people, to help them visualize what an electronic payment system actually looks like and what can you use it for in the smart city context. So again, our diagrams for the Sihanoukville government people had to be really simple and easy to understand, especially given that the language of business in Sihanoukville is not English. So there's lots of translation going on over here. So again, just a little bit more detail in terms of the objectives and outcomes, in terms of what's the functionality that we're after for an e-payment system, and what are the outcomes that we hope to deliver. So again, just a very high-level summary of those smart direction statements. So moving on to the smart city conceptual architecture, for me, this was the most fun part to do. Again, you know, I like to tell people I'm an enterprise architect. I'm not a solution architect. So when I did this work, I actually had to immerse myself a lot more to think about solution architecture and how could we define the smart city conceptually so that people would get it and understand what was required. So we proposed that the city implement a stage smart plan. You know, don't go out and try and build a smart city in a big bang. Build it in layers. So first start with building the foundation, and then deliver personalized government services. And then as you're putting more technology into the city, start gathering the data so that the city then becomes more intelligent. And as we're building on the intelligent and continuing to invest in smart city technologies, you could then eventually hope to achieve a real-time smart city, where if you could envisage a smart city that's an organic thing, that's responding to what's happening in the city at any time, whether it was traffic or wastewater management or parking, whatever it was, you know, the city is actually responding dynamically in real time. You and I know that in Australia, we haven't quite achieved it yet. We have achieved it in some cities in some small ways with, for example, the traffic management system in New South Wales is one of the best we have in the world. But this particular city was so far away from achieving even one project to contribute to its smart city strategy. So what we asked the city to do is to change its focus. So again, it was great hearing Fran earlier on talk about all of her work. We actually asked government to be more human-centric. So move away from viewing government as a group that delivers government services through channels and to citizens, to now become more citizen focused and citizen centric, and to think about the delivery of government services as experiences you want to offer the citizens of your city. So again, our main sponsor was the Director of Public Relations. So this particular model really resonated with her because she understood that what they'd been doing was trying to survive and deliver government services. But geez, wouldn't life be so much better if we did change our focus to citizens instead? So this is the big reveal. This is what the smart city conceptual architecture looked like for delivering that citizen focus. So you see the little robot that's in the center of this model. That is using intelligence, and this tight circle around that robot is where all the work with citizens happens, right? This is where we engage our citizens and how we go about engaging them. The outer circle, starting with the smart city citizen touchpoints, are all about creating these intelligent contact centers. And contact could happen anywhere, anytime, any device. So you could have virtual contact centers. They didn't actually have to be physical centers. So we talked about things like you're going to need a portal, you're going to need some websites, you're going to need to think about, you know, your development applications and how do houses get built so that we can set them up for being smart homes. We talked about media and events to educate citizens and help them to understand the journey the city was on. And then as we were maturing, using the data we're collecting from citizens, applying business analytics to fine-tune and design the city as it continued to evolve. And then government operations really being like what we would see a network operations center here in Australia. So rather than it just being focused on transport operations or emergency services operations or even health service delivery operations, this was having one government operations center that looked at government, the Sihanouk government model, as being a holistic entity, an ecosystem of all the departments working together to make sure that everybody was working as one to deliver real-time services to its citizens. So the plan that we provided government was, again, remembering taking that 4-stage plan. So starting off with being digital first and focusing on integration. So from a citizen point of view, how do we enable digital? How do we deliver one-stop services? From when we were there, the government had a strategy called the one window service. And that was one little window in a government building that somebody could come off the streets on their motorbike and they could go to this one window and pay all their bills and fines and so on and so forth. So again, that's technology we were used to maybe 20, 30 years ago in Australia, but fairly brand new for a city like Sihanoukville. So in terms of making the changes inside, so the citizen changes were all about looking at the outside in. The internal changes were looking at everything inside out. So internally, we were looking across the capability model. How can we deliver digital services well? And how do we deliver these services seamlessly? The focus on technology was for the platforms to now be multi, so support multiple devices and support multiple languages. Again, when we were there last year, the only language supported was Khmer. English was not supported on their website either. And then to start integrating these platforms and looking and driving the adoption of common solutions. So in terms of delivering, the next stage was this personalized smart city. The focus changed, right? How do we deliver personalized services to citizens? So our focus is on you, not everyone. And then internally, basically shifting the service delivery model to be evidence-based. So starting to use data to help make decisions about delivering services more efficiently. And then being technology enabled in everything that they do. And we talk about quadruple partnerships. So again, Sihanoukville government, because of their limited budget, were very constrained in terms of how they could evolve this architecture. So there's a really good model out there which says, you know, if you want to do anything, you should involve universities, you should involve government, you should involve industry, and the last one is you should involve citizens. So again, through the quadruple partnerships to work as a community and through an ecosystem to help evolve the evolution and evolution of the city. And then the real-time intelligent smart city. We figured you could accelerate a lot of the work once you had, you know, started investing significantly in technology through the automation of citizen experiences. How do you make it simple and easy and enjoyable for citizens to receive services? And doing intelligent service delivery. Wouldn't it be great that, you know, if government could tell me, you know, when I had a problem with my building or my design or my approval, so that I didn't have to keep chasing up and following up with government to find out where things were. And innovating on the smart city in real time as well. So being able to use things like big data and predictive and prescriptive analytics to help evolve the city organically, right? So that you don't have to kick off a project. The city grows itself, it heals itself, it fixes itself, it delivers services when citizens want. You know, and achieving that end state is something that is possible in all of our in all of the cities that we live in. We just haven't figured out how to use innovation to deliver real-time smart cities yet. So we envisage that end state for real-time and intelligent smart city is still a few years down the road. We did recognize that in order to deliver that conceptual architecture, government needed, beyond their smart direction statements, needed additional technology policies to deliver smart city. And they were from, you know, adopting the attitude that everything should be digital first. So whatever you do, again, because staff don't get paid a lot, to deliver government services. So if there was a way to improve service delivery, to always look at how can we automate this first. So very strong focus on digital, and then cloud first. So again, the Sihanoukville government still had a lot of their, or almost all their technology was terrestrial. And moving to the cloud was something that they hadn't even started doing. So again, looking at, you know, managing costs and investments in IT effectively was to look at as a service offerings from vendors. And then the next one being seamless architecture, having government to subscribe to the principles that I showed you before, so that government solutions could be delivered without any of the high interoperability or integration costs that we quite often see across government. Building a connected architecture. So again, this isn't only limited to technology architecture. This is about things like building their waterways, you know, their sewage systems, their waste management systems. Some of you may have heard of some of the innovations on the Sunshine Coast, where the CBD is connected with an underground garbage collection system, where all your garbage gets vacuumed into this great big tube that gets sent off to a collection center. So there's no need for garbage trucks to come and pick up your bins anymore. So again, it's about doing things like that, where you can design your building and infrastructure so that it is connected and everything communicates with each other. And then last but not least, security. So again, we've seen more recently here in Australia the impact on cyber security and the attacks that we have had. So again, just basic first principles of security, making sure that all data is secure, and government is using modern practices to secure their environment. So this might float the boat of some technologists. This is the solution architecture view of the conceptual architecture model. So again, a layered approach to basically talk about the experiences we want to give citizens, what are the technology capabilities that we would need to help enable a conceptual architecture like the one I've shown you. And it's broken into what are the things that are going to be unique to Sihanoukville government, but what's that whole layer that is actually common, and government can actually work together to streamline and offer the common enablers as a centralized service. And then, of course, the foundation technology enablers as well, and then all your management technologies on the right-hand side. We did include a requirement for capturing non-functional requirements because, again, Sihanoukville had no concept of some of these, what we call NFRs, non-functional requirements. So we put in statements for them to consider when they go out to market to ensure that these non-functional requirements were supported by the vendors that they selected to build the smart city. Moving on to how we use the capability model. So again, being a business architect, I was obviously very passionate about making sure that any plan for building the smart city should start with the business architecture. And therefore, we introduced the business capability model as a tool for helping them make decisions about where to invest in the future of the city. So we explained to them what the connection was between government motivations and business capabilities, and talked to them about not losing focus, that this is not just about putting in technology just because it's smart. You need to also consider people and process, as well as information when you consider technology solutions. And the uplift of capability must help to deliver government's motivations and strategic objectives. So this is a view of the capability model that we delivered. Again, made a layered model based on a number of different reference models and broken up into what's core business and what's back office business capabilities. So we showed them how to use the capability model to look at where strategy might be important across the business, and what are the pain points and challenges that you have in the business, and how are they impacting the delivery of your strategy. So, for example, where you have a lot of pain on a particular capability that's required to deliver a number of strategic outcomes, you are going to be really challenged from a people, process, information, or technology perspective to deliver that strategy. So again, that should focus, where do you want to invest? You want to invest in those areas that have a lot of pain and are critical to deliver strategy. So will my investments take away the risks and pain that the organization's feeling? So similarly, we taught them how to conduct a digital capability maturity assessment in terms of how digital ready are you to build a smart city. So again, the heat map allowed them to explore areas of the business that perhaps weren't as mature as they would have liked. But because the people we were interviewing didn't really have the right skill sets to do that assessment, we flipped the maturity assessment around to ask the question instead of what's the maturity of the capabilities that you will need to deliver each of the layers of the conceptual architecture for the smart city, and looking at the timeframes in terms of 12, 24, and 36 months. So how mature do you need to be at each of these timeframes, and which capabilities are you needing to be present at that right level of maturity? So by doing an analysis of what capabilities were required, we were able then to develop the roadmap based on those time horizons of 12, 24, and 36 months. And a lot of this was based on the work that we had done are the top two layers. So all the projects required to deliver smart city were on the top. The orange ones was another program that was taking place that had an impact on what we had proposed to be delivered as part of the smart city. And then the United Nations had also done some work in terms of what they saw as being required to deliver a smart city as well. And this work was based on an international study of the capabilities required for smart city. So again, we presented to them this roadmap, which showed them the investments needed to achieve their future state. Now, we also showed them this view, which is more of that maturity view. So in 12, 24 months and 36 months, here is where you would see the capabilities maturing over these periods. And so on the left-hand side, you have the high-level capabilities. And you could see from 12 to 24 to 36, you were evolving the architecture to deliver the target state in 36 months. So the last section I want to talk to you about is enterprise architecture governance and what we left them. We basically said, if you don't set up some sort of governance authority to monitor how these projects are being delivered and how the city is evolving, you're going to fail. So we said this was a critical capability that they needed to establish in order to manage the change effectively. So one of them was setting up an enterprise architecture engagement model. And we talked about the services that are typically offered in such an enterprise architecture office, if you like, and what they do, right? So these are the services enterprise architecture offers and works with the IT service organization to help support Sihanoukville business units. We also proposed a governance structure that a lot of us will be familiar with. It's about setting the direction. So we've given them the smart city strategy. We helped them pick the right projects to do. And it was up to them to do the projects right. So we explained to them all the different things that they needed to be able to set up for success. We set some objectives for enterprise architecture governance, you know, the why we do governance. This certainly helped us in having them understand and appreciate why they needed to have these structures in place to deliver the smart city. Again, we left them with this very simple message. You know, if you want to deliver your smart city, people will say you are successful if you've delivered something useful, simple, and enjoyable. It comes down to those three things, right? Whether you're a citizen or whether you're a public servant delivering services, when you think about the smart city, how can we all work together to deliver that real-time intelligent city of the future? When we're delivering our projects, if they help government to increase productivity and the cost of service has reduced and people are happy at work, then we know we've been successful, right? We've achieved what we set out to achieve. And on that note, Daryl, I covered 44 slides in 44 minutes. Pretty good.
Amazing as always, Christine. So I am having a little trouble with the Q&A panel on the platform for some reason. All of the end of the question list has disappeared. So I'm just going to have a conversation with you. There's some applause rippling up the screen, so I can clearly see that people are very happy with what you've shared today. Yeah, just a little bit of trouble with the platform trying to get to the latest presentations. Oh, I can see there's a recent comment there from Heidi saying great presentation, Christine. And Sandrine is asking, can you talk about timing for all of those actions and bottlenecks you encountered?
Timing to complete the project?
Well, timing for all of those actions that you showed and any bottlenecks.
Yeah, so in order to, again, we had a plan for them to achieve those actions across 12, 24, and 36 months. Some of them would go beyond. That was the plan. the biggest bottleneck was funding. Because when you, and again, I'm going to make the assumption that not everybody knows the history of Cambodia. So they came out of a very sad, you know, government where they were basically ruled by somebody that decimated, you know, probably 60% of the population. Don't quote me on the numbers, but it was a horrendous genocide of local people that the country is still recovering. So it's one of the poorest countries in the world, and one of the reasons why Australia gives so much aid to Cambodia, as does a number of other countries around the world. Now, Cambodia is progressing because of the investment that the world is providing. So to be able to achieve, you know, even the simplest of things like put in parking sensors or putting sensors on traffic lights, that's not the highest priority of the city. It's the health and well-being and education of its citizens. That's a higher priority for its citizens. Chinese investors might love to have, you know, a modern city to come and visit, but the citizens of Sihanoukville want the basics in life that you and I take for granted. So the thing that's holding them back from implementing those actions is funding. That's a big blocker.
Yeah, absolutely. I was curious about your observations on the cultural differences between consulting in Cambodia and other countries that you've consulted in.
It was one of the concerns when we responded to the tender. One of the questions was, you know, do you have experience dealing with people where English isn't their first language? So thankfully, you know, because I was born in Asia, I've lived in a few Asian countries, India, Singapore, Dubai, and then Australia. What I've learned is how to speak really slowly and also how to speak fluent broken English, and to understand my audience, so building connection with them. The Cambodian people are absolutely beautiful people. They're a very gentle race. So they understanding that was really important, to know that you couldn't come out and be the loud big boss. You had to be, you know, very gentle, very quiet, very passive. And they're also a very shy community. They don't like to be the tall poppy, like some of us might like to be here in Australia. They want to sit in the back of the room, not the front of the room. So again, you know, my skills in teaching people, you know, helping people to learn suddenly helped a lot, because it's about encouraging the classroom to speak. So it's the same thing. You're running this massive workshop in a 5-star hotel in Sihanoukville, and nobody wants to talk because the mayor is in the room. Right? No one talks when the mayor's talking. So how do you make it a safe environment so that everybody who has something to say has an opportunity to speak out? That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and Sandrine has come back saying thanks for the answers. Amazing project. Thanks a lot for sharing. So that's great. And so you've sort of hinted at it a little bit there, but could you expand on what stakeholder engagement looked like on the project? Was there a formality to it, or was it quite casual? Were they expecting formalized documentation, or could it be a little bit more sort of casual?
It was everything I didn't expect, to put it simply. you know, in most of the projects I've worked in around the world, you gather a bunch of stakeholders in a room or maybe on a call like this, and you put them through their paces, you give them some Excel spreadsheets to fill out, you know, you ask them a lot of questions, you get them to do overlays and stuff like that, and it's easy peasy. But we had to do everything through a translation service. So if anybody wants to work in that region, one of the skills you have to pick up really quickly is how to work with a translation service. And fortunately for me, the company I was working with in Cambodia brought the translators in to spend a day with me in the office, so I could give them an enterprise architecture 101 lesson for the day, so that when they were actually in the room and we're doing our presentation, they understood the language I was using and they could translate it. And because we also had Khmer people on my team, they were able to verify for me that the translators were actually saying the right thing or the wrong thing.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. At first glance, I'd say that there might be some challenges in terms of accurately translating enterprise architecture speak into something relatable.
One of the things I did, because I know the language barrier, I actually had all the models that I shared with you today printed out in A0 and plastered like wallpaper along the hotel, the ballroom's walls. And I put it up before people had come in. So when people came into the room, their natural curiosity made them walk the walls and to look at the pictures, so that when I started talking about what's in this picture, they could make a connection to what they saw. And it just made the whole workshop so effective, because again, we only got paid if the mayor signed off and liked what we told them, right? And so it meant that the people in the room had to understand what we were talking about for them to nod their head and say, yep, you've delivered.
Right, right. I suppose that speaks to the power of the visualizations that we use as well.
Absolutely.
There's an understandability of the structure of the diagrams that sort of transcends the language that's used in the boxes. Yeah.
And it's not about just any picture, the way we organized it. So I started off the presentation by showing you the storyboard. That to me is the secret sauce, because that model tells, that layout told a story. And we repeated that story multiple times through the workshops with the audience. And because the story was stitched up so well, people were able to follow the logic and understand, because that's what we want to try and achieve, is understanding. So if you just put up pictures because they look like good wall art, you're going to fail. So it's really important in situations like this to be able to tell a story that anybody can understand, even if you aren't in the room.
Yeah, so this is reminiscent of a session just a couple of speakers ago where we were talking about I guess the value of architects, and I was talking about how to some extent, especially when I was a solution architect, it didn't really matter what the format was of the material I was sharing. It was about the transfer of understanding and knowledge from one person to another to enable activity to occur. Yeah.
So even here in Australia, I get challenged sometime, you know, when I've had people on my team with very heavy French and Scottish accents, and nobody wanted to work with them because they couldn't be understood. So and people would give me the feedback. I don't understand, Bob, because Bob's accent's so heavy. So I'd coach them and say, next time you're in a room with Bob, get Bob to draw what he's talking about. And then immediately the problem went away.
Yeah. I could make a reference to a voice-activated elevator, but I won't. That's amazing. Is it how long did the entire engagement take?
The duration of the project was over 6 months, but the actual work wasn't that long. The work was probably about 8 to 10 weeks worth of work.
It's interesting stuff, and as I say, lots of potential challenges, but they're just things to overcome, aren't they? So you can do the work and get the outcome.
Absolutely. I had a good team working with me on it as well. And just having that mix of a local Khmer person, actually we had 2 working on the team who were very highly educated. One of them had done his master's here in Queensland. So their grasp of English was so much better than the Sihanoukville government people. Having a mix like that on the team really, really helped us.
And was that a conscious choice and plan, or was that just sort of coincidental that it worked out that way?
Because I'd partnered with a Cambodian company, it was just people from their company who were locals. The managing director was an Australian Cambodian person. His Khmer was terrible, but his English was bloody good. So again, he helped us with the resources on the Cambodian side, and we brought the resources from the Australian side in to do the work.
It reminds me of the feedback I get on pitch decks for startups, that it's the investors tend to focus on the team. It's all about the team and the quality of the individuals in that team. So you know how that can make a difference.
Actually, drawing on Sonia's presentation, a good leader brings the right resources in and supports you to deliver. That's what this guy did for us.
Yep. Yeah, that sounds like a leader. Yep. All right, Christine, thank you. You've done a lot on this this conference. You've been a guest on Sonia's session. You've been in the background pinging questions through. You've been on 2 different sessions. I really appreciate your help with WIA Takes Over Built. I mean, it wouldn't have been a WIA Takes Over Built event if we didn't have you involved. So, as always, appreciate your leadership.
Amazing. Yeah, it's been amazing, and even more amazing to see all the presentations and the thought leadership, from women. I've known a few of the presenters, but geez, I've met a whole heck lot more. So the community just got bigger today.